Hello and welcome to episode 75, and today we're not going to look at individual bits of gear. We're going to look at how you can safely get online decent equipment second-hand and perhaps sort of get things that are a little bit more unusual. Now what I mean is, if you look at internet auction sites, everybody automatically thinks of eBay. Now that's perfectly sensible because eBay is a great place to get all sorts of bits and pieces. But it's not the best place to pick up things like unusual microphones or perhaps video kit or lighting, that sort of stuff, because it's become too well known. And if you would look on eBay, the prices of some of the sort of popular microphones it's just crazy. If you look at popular audio gear for sort of recording, home recording, and video gear for sort of podcasting, that sort of stuff, the stuff on eBay is not cheap anymore. You'll see sort of really quite nice gear. I mean, I've been searching for things like Electro Voice RE20s. I've been looking for Shure SM7Bs, Neumann 87s, and you never really get a bargain on eBay anymore. And also, of course, you're never quite sure who you're buying from. So you could actually, I suppose, be buying stolen gear. It's perfectly possible. But eBay as a place to buy things in an auction is not the same as buying them from real professional auction houses. I'll explain. If you buy something on eBay, let's say you buy a microphone on eBay for 100 quid, you can send it back. On eBay, you've got two routes. You've got business sellers like me. I mean, I sell two-way radios on eBay, and I'm a business seller, and realistically, I have to accept the fact that there is sort of a protection element built into eBay. The distance selling regulations in the UK are quite strict. You can buy something online, and if you don't like it, you've got 14 days to send it back. You don't have to have a reason. You just can say, I don't want it. So if I sell something to a customer on eBay, they can send it back for no reason at all. Just didn't like it. That's a bit of a pain, but it works both ways. It means that the £5 or thereabouts that I have to pay to send an item to a customer, I've lost. It's gone. Equally, if they send something back because they didn't like it, the return postage is their problem and they'll pay that. So we sort of both end up paying something for none of us getting what we really wanted. It's just how it is. So I can live with selling a radio on eBay, and within 2 weeks they can send it back and I lose the postage. And that's just how it works. And it does give the buyers protection. It gives them a bit of a sort of comfort blanket so they know they're not going to be left high and dry. And pretty much that applies to every type of online purchase that you make, with the exception of auctions. Now, auctions are deliberately different, and the distance selling regulations don't work because auctions are not considered to be domestic type transactions. So if you buy from an online auction, things are very different from eBay. What this means in practice is that before you can even look at what they've got for sale, you're probably going to have to register. Now, for auctions, it's really important that you do read those terms and conditions. You know, the things that we normally click through without really bothering. Because before you can get the auction catalogue in many cases, you need to give them your credit or debit card number. You actually promise them that if you buy something, then you understand that 20% VAT is going to be added, and also what they call the buyer's premium, which is usually 15%, and that gets added on top. Now the upshot is that if you buy a microphone for 100 quid, they're going to put 20% VAT, so that's 20 quid, and then they're going to add 15% on that. So you're paying nearly £140. So £140 when you thought you were spending 100. You've got to remember that. Now, the other thing is that virtually all the auction houses, with probably just one or two sort of exceptions, expect you to go and pick the gear up. They won't post it. One of the auction houses will do. They don't tell you how much postage is, so you have to basically take a punt. So you need to know how heavy something is. Now, I don't know if you've sent anything heavy through either the Royal Mail or UPS, FedEx, any of the couriers. If you send heavy things, it can be really expensive. So if you bought something small but heavy in an auction, it could easily cost you 40 quid to actually get it delivered to your door. And you don't have any control over that. It's done afterwards. So treat their postage as a sort of optional extra over which you have no control. So you're buying blind. Now, location is always important. You need to know where are the goods that you've got to go and collect. Now, I'm in the most easterly town here in England, and our road links and rail links are pretty terrible. So if I buy something, I need to know where is it. If I drive my van down to central London, it's a diesel. So I will have the congestion charge to pay, and I'll also have the emissions charge to pay. So for me, driving down to London is just not really economic anymore. Now, if I go on a train, the train charge for me being ancient, because I get it a bit cheaper, the cheapest I can get a return to London from here is about £47, and I think the normal cheap ticket is 67, something like that. So London is a very expensive place to get to. Some of the other auctions tend to be in the GU postcode, so sort of London-ish, but not quite as bad. But that's still going to be mileage. And one of the other auction houses that I buy from time to time is in Lincolnshire. That's about 2.5 hours from here. So all these things are going to be taken into account. And if you forgive me, I'll give you an anecdote to tell you how awful it can actually get. Apart from the sort of normal liquidation type sales you find on these places where, an audio-visual firm maybe has gone bust and the official receiver is selling off all their assets, so all the gear goes to auction. Sometimes you get people like the BBC, and the BBC stick their gear up when they maybe are moving, or perhaps when they're closing a department down or downsizing it, and the BBC sell off the gear. And they can be quite interesting because you can pick up some quite nice, quite clever gear, sometimes for not a lot of money. And I saw a sale a few years back, and it was for a mini disc player. It was a studio mini disc player, and I'd always wanted this particular model, and one came up, and because mini disc was on the way out and not many people were buying them, few people were sort of putting bids in, and I put a sort of throwaway bid in. I think it was something like 35 quid. I put the bid in for this BBC television centre closing down, blah blah blah, and I'd heard that the London studios were closing down, so I figured I'd take advantage of it, and I put 35 quid bid in, and I won. And I got an email from them telling me that my item was ready for collection at BBC Television Centre, Glasgow. I hadn't read it. I saw TV Centre and assumed it was the London one, and it was actually BBC Television Centre in Glasgow. And they gave me a 5-day period to collect it. No postage was available, so basically I was expected to go all the way up to Glasgow. And you have to be also careful because in the terms and conditions, sometimes an auction house will then store the goods for you and they charge you for storage space. In this particular case, the goods had to be collected by the Friday night, and if they weren't, then the goods would be destroyed. Presumably they would just get rid of them. And I had a bit of a panic. A friend of mine, Bruce, up in Glasgow, said he would collect it for me, and I said, well, if you do that, if you just bung it in the post, I'll give you the money for the postage. That's fine. Thanks ever so much. Cheers for helping me out. And a few days later, the item turned up in the post, and I asked Bruce how much he wanted for postage, and he said nothing at all, because when he turned up late on the Friday afternoon, and the security people who looked at his paperwork said he was going to be the last person. So the bulldozers were moving in the next day. Basically, if he could take anything else he found, he was welcome to it, because tomorrow it was being scrapped. So he helped himself to all the stuff in the studio that was left that he could use, including the little red lights that light up over the door to say sort of mic live and stuff like that. Basically, whatever he could get out by the 5:30 was his. That's the sort of auction where you collect it from the premises. And he was extremely grateful because he got a van full, just because he went in to pick up my mini disc player. So he bunged it in the post and we were both extremely happy. You really need to read the details. Where the goods are, when you have to collect it, and are there any hidden storage problems if you can't get there on the day. I mean, normally if they're in an auction house, they'll store them and probably charge you. But if it's being collected from a customer's premises, those premises might well, like the BBC example, be being knocked down the next day and your goods will be gone. But they've got your MasterCard or Visa number and they'll charge you. There's no getting out of paying for these things. Part of the deal when you sign up is that you will pay. Bids are binding, and it's not like eBay where you can phone them up and say, I'm terribly sorry, I ordered it by mistake. It doesn't work with this type of thing. I've collected some examples of the sort of gear that I might be interested in from 2 or 3 of the online sales that are running now. And I thought I'd share with you some of the stuff that looks interesting and reasons why perhaps you might not want to put the bid in. So this one is for 3 times ARRI 800 watt lights. Now, these, to anybody who knows about TV lighting, are what are called redheads, despite the fact that the ARRI ones are blue. But generally, that type of 800 watt light is called a redhead. And frankly, nobody wants them. Nobody is bidding on redheads at the moment. In actual fact, during the week, I've been looking through the stores and things, and there's piles of redheads, there's piles of blondes, which are the 2K version, and they're sitting there and nobody wants them because tungsten lighting is dead. Mainly because it's old-fashioned, but of course now it's not particularly sort of save the planet friendly, is it? So we've moved into LED lighting, and tungsten is now a bit of an enemy. But even worse, even if you sort of just think, well, I'll just use it because it's a good deal, the running costs are extortionate now. So to run an 800 watt or more light now is really genuinely throwing money away. In this studio here, we're all LED. But still hanging from the roof, there are some ARRI tungsten lights, 1Ks. And I'd be foolish to turn those on. 1K at the moment is getting on for sort of 50 pence an hour to run it. So turn a few of those on. That's, we're getting into silly money. So tungsten lights like these ARRI 800 watt redheads, really, the best thing about it comes with an ARRI soft bag. That's probably worth having. 3 stands, and then it's got a softbox arrangement with it too. But it's starting at 140 quid. It's really got no value, so I'm discounting that one. Other things that can trip you up are where you don't know what you think you know. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if we look at this one, lot 88, it does actually say on this particular one, postage and packaging services may be available for small lots. They don't tell you how much, so bear that in mind. But basically, in the sale, it's basically a cardboard box and it's got some pairs of headphones in it. Looks like there's 3. HD 480 Sennheisers, and then DT 234s. Yeah, that's a familiar name, isn't it? So Bayer 234s, yeah, okay. And a net test headset. I don't even know what that is. But the one that worries me a little bit here is the Canford DT234. Canford are a great company, and they actually make lots of things that the BBC buy. And their version of headphones are usually fitted with limiters. Because if you work for the BBC, if you're caught using a pair of headphones that do not have hearing protection fitted internally, which basically is a gizmo that stops you turning the welly up a bit, you could, of course, sue the BBC for when you get bad hearing. So hearing level protected headsets in the BBC are quite common. And this is a BBC sale. So it's the BBC's R&D department. I don't know much about them, but they're selling everything. It looks like there are desks, computers, chairs, and then a load of gear. And so this one is a starting bid, 10 quid for a couple of pairs of headphones. What's it going to end up at? I mean, what would your sort of top price be? Maybe you'd say for a couple of decent pairs of headphones, and the 480s are quite nice ones too. So maybe you go up to 30 quid. It's 30 quid plus 20% plus 15% plus the postage, because you're not really going to go and drive 100 miles or so to pick up this lot. It's a bit worrying. If it goes much above 10 quid, it's just not worth putting a bid in for. Other things might be worth a bit of a punt, but where they are, the starting price always tends to creep up. The Blackmagic Video Hub. Now, bear in mind that the vast majority of these things are described and photographed by the auction staff, not by technical people. So for anybody that knows, the Video Hub 20 by 20 is a router. So basically a 20 input Blackmagic device that's got 20 outputs. So make sure you go to the Blackmagic site and double check exactly what it is you're buying. Like the story with the sort of SDI versus HDMI type products, you know, it's no good buying something like this that looks at routing SDI inputs if you've actually got HDMI in your studio. It's a bit worthless. And the starting bid of 400 quid indicates two things to me. One, it's actually a decent product. It's been looked at, it says tested and working. So it's relatively modern too. A nice piece of kit, but it's not really cheap, is it? 400 quid, 20%, 15% added on top of that. You're up into serious money. You need to check whether they can post it. And with this one, it says it can be arranged, so they will package it up. It doesn't tell you how much though, so you've got to be a little bit careful here. Next item on the list. I've been looking at buying a box lens for my 2/3 inch cameras for a long time. I don't really need one, to be perfectly honest, because the sort of things that I'm doing here, the cameras are fixed and the lenses are fine. But a box lens has always been something I quite fancied having. Now the snag with these things is that the descriptions are written very carefully, because the only time you're going to get your money back from an auction like this is if they're misdescribed. So the auctioneers take it very carefully and look at the products, look for things that would be a reason for you sending them back if you didn't know about it. Like if they say it works and it doesn't, that's a good reason. If they don't say something, omitting it is not a reason for sending it back. So in this particular one, Fujinon HA27 box lens. Front element has a scratch, untested. Right, well, if it's got a scratch on the lens, these lenses are huge. And on wide angle, it's quite feasible that a mark on the lens is a very visible mark in the image. So it could be totally useless. Now, it also says untested. Some of their other lenses are tested. So why is this one not? Now, to me, that's a pretty good indication that they don't think it works. And maybe just the scratch on the front is enough for them to say it's not worth wasting time with. So we'll stick it up with a starting bid of 300 quid and see if an idiot buys it. Because I think you'd probably have to be. Because bearing in mind, most of these box lenses are just the lens. You're not getting the zoom demand or the focus demand. If they were there, it would tell you, because they're actually quite sought after devices. And a focus and a zoom demand would easily on eBay cost you £150 each upwards. So the fact that they're not there means you're going to have to source them from somewhere else if you want to use this lens. So I think this one's out. Even worse, a Fujinon A15. Well, a 15 times zoom is nothing to get particularly excited about, but it is a box lens. This one though says focus connector has been removed. Well, to use these, you have a socket that you plug the zoom demand in, and you have a socket that you plug the focus demand in. You know, there is no big knob to move on the front of these things, so you need that control. And the connector's gone. Now, why? Does that mean it's faulty? Does it mean someone's robbed it for parts? It's untested, so they only want 100 quid as a starting bid for this, but I'd suggest that 100 quid is probably a complete waste of time.